guys, and welcome back. Today on the show we're talking about quarter sheet sandpaper. I don't know how you guys cut your sandpaper or measure it to go into your quarter sheet sanders, but my method is kind of barbaric and it usually looks something like this. So I'm going to show you guys today how to make yourself a little easy jig. Only takes about a half an hour to make, if that, and it'll make your life a lot easier for getting your quarter sheet sandpaper for your quarter sheet sander. So the first thing that you're going to need to start this project off would be a piece of plywood. I'm going to use a 3/4 inch thick piece, and we want to start off by cutting it at a 12 by 12 square. Okay, so here we have it, our 12 by 12 board, and the first thing you want to do is draw a center line right down the middle here at 6 inches. So using my Incra, you've seen this 1,000,001 times. There we are at 6 inches center line. The next thing that you want to do is across the top of your board, you want to run a line across at the 3 inches mark. So right at 3 inches, we're going to put a mark right there. Again, from the top of the board, using my larger Incra now, because the smaller one only goes up to 6 inches, we want to put a mark now at 7 1/2 inches down, and then another one at 8 1/2 inches down. I know that this doesn't make much sense to you guys at this point in time, but it's going to come together, trust me. On each of the sides of the board now, we want to put a mark at 3/4 of an inch. So a mark on this side at 3/4 and a mark on this side at 3/4. Now the other thing you're going to need for this project is one of these, which is a used hacksaw blade. So with that now being marked out, we'll move on to the next step of this sandpaper jig. Okay, so I've spun the camera around so that you guys can see it right side up instead of upside down. This is the top of our board up here. Basically what I want to do now is I want to take this over to either the router table or the scroll saw, and I want to cut a groove right here along this 3/4 line and along this 3/4 line. Now the length of it isn't really crucial. It's just important that you don't come off the end of the board at the bottom and you don't cut into this line that you've drawn at 3 inches. So let's just have a look at this here, and I think I'm going to make it go from 2 inches up from the bottom of the board to, let's just say, another 2 inches past this line that we drew here at 7 1/2 inches. So that'll be another 2 inches to here. And so now I'm going to cut this groove. I haven't decided how, if I'm going to do it with the router table or a scroll saw. You know what, I haven't used my router table in a while. I think I'm going to go that road. So I'll set that up and I'll be right with you. Alright, so here we are over at the router table, and we've got a start block clamp to our fence and a stop block clamp to our fence. And basically what we want to do here is we want to route a through groove from the 2 points that we marked out here earlier in our board in at the 3/4 mark. So I've set my fence so that the center of this bit is at 3/4 of an inch. And you know, some of you guys that are going to say, hey look, he's got his fingers on that bit here, you know, flick it on and off, nothing. I don't mess around with the power on, so it's a little safety thing for you there. Anyway, what you want to do is raise it above your bit, up against your start block, and then lower it slowly down onto your bit until it sits flush, and then run it from right to left until it touches your stop block. At that point in time, you can shut off your router. Once it comes to a complete stop, lift this off and then flip it over and do the other side. Now, a lot of guys that do this who are new to woodworking crank that bit right up through and they try to do it in one pass, and that's a fool's game, boys. That's a fool's game. You'll just burn your wood to pieces. So you want to do it in increments and raise the blade up through to eventually have it penetrate through this side of your wood to come through. You'll get a much cleaner cut with no burning. So I'm going to go ahead and do this and route these grooves that we've marked out. Alright, so we've got our grooves cut here in our board, and the ultimate goal here that we want is to have one of these T-bolts up through here for our jig. So what I'd like to do in the back of the jig is I'm going to route a 5/8 kind of a recess in here so that the T-bolt will sit flush to this board, and as well it'll give it some edge to bite on so that when you're cranking on our set knob up on the top of the jig, this isn't going to just spin on you. So I'm going to set the bit up, and again using the same stop method, I'm going to cut those recesses. One thing you may want to note here is that before I could run it through and then flip the board and run it through using the same stop blocks. That's not the case here. If you do that, you're going to end up with one here and one here, obviously, trying to get it using the same stop blocks. So you will have to adjust your stop blocks on your jig for your recess for your T-bolts. So the next thing that you're going to need now that the routing is all done is a scrap of 3/4 ply. And this one here is 2 inches wide, good enough, but you're going to need the length of it to be 12 inches. So I'm ripping it here to a 12-inch length, and then we're going to do some marking, drill some holes, and we're going to attach that to the jig, and I'll show you how we're going to do that. We've got our scrap piece of 2-inch ply. We've got it cut to our 12-inch length, and now we just want to mark a hole, or mark our mark for a hole 3/4 of an inch from each end. And it's not coincidence that it's the same measurement as what we routed our grooves in, because these holes are going to line up. We're also going to want to mark the center of our board at 1 inch. So I'm going to take this over to the drill press, and I'm going to drill a 3/8 hole at each of these marks. We've got our holes drilled in our scrap board, and we just want to test it just to see how everything comes together. Basically, the bottom line with this particular scrap board that we just put on is this is a stop for the paper. So we don't want this moving, but we want to be able to slide it to adjust it. You know, that moves rather well. So we want to line it up with the line that we drew there earlier, and then we should just be able to crank that down and have that solid on there, and that's beautiful. I'm digging that. Alright, so this all fits nicely, so we're going to move on to the next step, and this one here, there's going to be several methods to do it, but I'm going to break out the wood burner. Alright, so we got the wood burner heated up, and basically what I want to do is I want to burn these lines into our jig board. Now, if you don't have a wood burner, don't worry about it. I mean, as my mother used to say there's more than one way to skin a cat. But anyway, you want to make sure that this is square. This is kind of important. So we're just gonna burn that line across there. There we go. And we're going to burn this in so that we've got a permanent line now going across our jig. Now I'd just like to point out to you guys, if you're going to use the wood burner, don't put a lot of pressure up against your square. Reason for that is the metal of the square causes the heat that's in the wood burner to dissipate almost instantly into the square, which makes it so that it won't burn squat. So there you go, a little tip for you. Anyway, I'm going to carry on here. You guys don't need me to see me burn this all the way across, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to burn this all the way across, and then I'm going to give it a light sanding on this side of the board. I want to leave this original line 3 inches from the top intact. So I'll burn this and I'll come back. Now the last step that you want to do, now that we've got all of our lines burnt in, is you want to mount your hacksaw blade. Before we do, you just want to check your measurements. From this line that you marked 3 inches from the top end, there should be 4.5 inches to this first burnt line and 5.5 to the second burnt line. We've got that right, so now what you want to do is you want to mount your hacksaw blade onto your jig. You want to mount it so that the teeth of the blade are exactly on that line that you drew there, that line at the 3 inches. Now we're a little close to the edge here, so I'm going to re-drill some holes in this hacksaw blade. And what you want to do is when you screw your blade down, you want to use one number 10 washer, just like that, just to space your blade up ever so slightly off of your jig board. So I'm going to drill this and I'm going to install this blade, and I'm going to show you how this works. Alright, it's demonstration time. Maiden voyage of our little jig here. The importance of these lines, the distance that I said to check. The reason for that is that on average, a normal sheet of sandpaper is 9 inches by 11 inches. So what these lines are a way to show you where to set up your stop. So if you set it up to your first line, just like so, just tighten that down so it's not going to move. What you want to do is take your sandpaper, slide it underneath your hacksaw blade, and again I said underneath is a number 10 washer on each side to give it a little bit of height. And then from there, holding it up against your jig, remember this is your first line, so it's going to tear at the halfway mark on the 11-inch side, just like that. Okay, and then from there you put the next one in, just like that. Remember there in my video from before, I was showing you guys how I fold it and then I crease it and then I use it on the edge of my table saw. Well, now we've got those 3 ripped. Move it up to your next line, just a quick little tighten, and now you want to slide it in this way and give it a tear. This way, just like that. Line it up, give it a tear. Now guys, I'm probably doing these, well, way faster than my old method. And it's not perfect. I wonder what happens if we're going to do it this way. Let's try it backwards. You know, this is a new jig for me too, right? So, oh, that works way better. Oh, but then the sandpaper sticks. Okay, don't do that. Don't do that. Okay, let's do it sandpaper up. That works for me. So sandpaper up, give it a tear. And again, sandpaper up, and give it a tear. You want to go fast with that. It doesn't seem to work very well when you go slow. And we'll just straighten those all up there. And there we have it. In just a few short seconds, we've torn 12 1/4-inch sheets. Boys, that's way better than folding it and tearing it on the edge of your table saw, I'll tell you that. This is an awesome jig. Alright. And there you have it. Who knew, eh? Scrap plywood and a few jig parts and a little bit of an old hacksaw blade, and Bob's your uncle. Great way to do your 1/4 sheet sandpaper, guys, and make yourself one. I mean, it took nothing but scrap and about a half an hour of my time. So, and I tell you, it's going to save a lot of hassle later on. But either way, give it a try. Guys, thanks for watching, and I'm going to see you again next week with, yeah, you guessed it, another woodworking video. I just want to reiterate on what I said earlier when I was demonstrating the jig. After trying it some more, I did find that it works 10 times better sandpaper side down. The only difference is, instead of sliding it out of the jig, you actually have to pick it up out of the jig. But as far as the cutting quality, sand side down does a 10 times better job. Thanks again for watching, guys.